Please take your seats quickly, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tennis Weekly with Joel, Kim and Chris. On today's Tour Catch-Up, sponsored by DownloadTennis.com.
Krejcikova stuns Swiatek in Dubai.
Norrie takes revenge on Alcaraz in Rio.
And Djokovic surpasses Graf for most weeks at number one.
Kim, Chris, today is the 27th of February and we are here to catch up on the week in tennis at Tennis Weekly HQ, especially backed by our crowdfunders Caroline Girling and Stephen Rankin. It's been another entertaining week on the tour, a surprising week actually, because Iga Swiatek, oh my word, lost to Barbora Krejcikova in the final in Dubai. We had the Brits doing very, very well with Cam Norrie winning in Rio, as well as Andy Murray getting to the final, losing to Medvedev, who's made it back-to-back titles in consecutive weeks in Doha. And we've had some historic news today. Novak Djokovic has surpassed Steffi Graf for number of weeks at World No.1. Guys, it has also been a historic occasion because it's been a sad day for me because Malek Yaziri, one of my favourites, one of my favourite players whose history has been entwined with the story of the podcast, he has been sent into retirement today in Dubai in the men's event by Alejandro Davidovich Fokina. He had a wild card, he went out very easily, and now I've got to spend the next hour or so, I feel like, processing this sad information.
I've got to be completely honest, I'm not 100% sure who that is.
Oh, Chris!
Chris, you don't know who Malek Yaziri is?
I don't. I know this is bad.
Joel, are you more hurt by the fact that Chris doesn't know who he is or the fact that he's now retired?
A bit both, to be honest. I'm absolutely devastated. I thought maybe there was one more run he could go through to the second round or the third round. Maybe he could take another wild card into an event in the Middle East, but sadly not. And he's hung up his tennis racket. Although he will still be on the tour, I believe he is now. I wasn't even aware of this. He is the coach of Vasek Pospisil, but yeah, he's now officially hung his racket up. His playing days are over.
That's quite an interesting partnership. But Chris, so for the backstory for you, for yourself, and for any listeners who haven't been with us since the early days of the podcast, myself and Joel bonded over a Malek Yaziri match at the Australian Open in 2018. It was against Salvatore Caruso, another name you may never have heard of.
Was this on Rod Laver?
No,
it was on the court, furthest, in the corner, furthest from the main arena. And even though it was it had gone late, it was 5 sets, it still felt like there was only about 13, 14 people watching. But it was that sort of time where I was talking to Kim about, hey, should we start a podcast? And that's how Yaziri is so related and entwined in the podcast lore.
I don't even know who won that match between him and Caruso, but I remember someone accusing the other player of feigning an injury and all sorts. It went a bit sort of grudge match.
Kim, I think that the biggest thing to have come out of that match was the podcast, not the result itself. It was the formation of the podcast.
We should get them both on.
He did indeed win it. He did win it. I can confirm it went to 5 sets and he won it 6-3 in the final set. So what a result for Malek.
I'd love to have him on. We could ask him how significant that match was for his career, if he remembers it even. If he remembers that dude in the crowd.
Does he remember you? Yes, exactly.
Let's come back to the present day, though. Otherwise, we'll be spending the whole episode perhaps reminiscing about random matches at AO 2018, which isn't what most people are here for, I'm sure. What's been your highlight from this week on the tour? Joel, your highlight from the tennis, but I am dying to know how your pepperami pancake went as well. So if you can kind of fill us in on both, that would be great.
The less said about that, the better, I think. Yes. Listeners, I suggested maybe pancake and a pepperami sort of rolled around each other. Yeah, it's not a thing. It does not work. And definitely do not have the pepperami in the fridge before eating it, cold and hot. The contrast, it just doesn't work. It's a recipe for disaster. So we can leave it we can leave it firmly there. But in terms of the actual action on the court this week, what my highlight was, and it's my highlight because it just gave me a lot of confidence, and it was Maxime Cressy in Marseille against Jeffrey Blancaneau, and he served what is dubbed the reverse perfect game, which is 4 double faults in a row, broken to love. It was very messy. He still won the match, which was great. But watching that, it just sort of gave me some confidence that, it does happen to the top players as well.
Messy from Cressy. Goodness, that is a bad game, isn't it?
I love that. Messy from Cressy.
I do think, though, that we have seen like this transition, this slow evolution of more and more players being like, I'm just going to serve 2 first serves, as opposed to I'll do a first serve and then I'll have my very steady second serve, which is my high percentage play. I do think you get more and more players now like Cressy, who, if you watch it, you can see why he served 4 double faults. He was just going for it on every serve, and obviously that's a completely different approach and mindset to have. But it certainly feels like, for me, something we've seen become increasingly popular on the tour over the last couple of years.
And he does do a lot of service practice, I was going to say. Most of his game is the serve and the volley, so maybe he practices it more than others, so he backs himself to make it more than miss. Yeah. And the odds are very much in favour of him making one of them, but it did look a bit like when he got to 3 double faults, he wasn't hopeful for that last one.
I suppose by the time he'd done 3, he thought, I might as well do 4 now and then just call that game a bit of a write-off.
Get some publicity.
Chris, what about you? What's amused you from the world of tennis this week? And I also want to ask, I think you were having some pancakes last week when we had it. You were having some galettes?
Yes, I was.
How were your galettes?
Well, I sent you a picture. They went very well. It is with buckwheat flour. I did find that out. So that's something for our listeners who aren't looking for pepperami cold pepperami in a pancake. A galette is very easy to make, and you can make it sweet or savoury. So very much recommend for next year for people looking for a pancake recipe. But kind of on the court, and I guess slightly off the court, I have a confession and I also have a highlight. So my confession is that I only just realised why Jessie Pegula's nickname is so good, being JPEG. I had no idea it was related to the image format. I had no idea. So,
and don't you work in like brands?
I have to
Chris,
send JPEGs all the time.
Images.
I literally do. I deal in visuals, Kim. So that was a moment when I thought, wow, that's a low point really for the old brain. But having said that,
great nickname though, isn't it, JPEG?
I think it's the best nickname on the tour now. Now I know what it's about.
It's better than $1 Billion Princess, isn't it?
I think I'd take JPEG over $1 Billion Princess, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think so.
But in terms of why I'm bringing up JPEG at this stage and why I will be using that so relentlessly when speaking about that, as I only now know what it means, she's winning us over on the tennis court, but also on Twitter. She did a hilarious tweet this week, which was kind of mocking the fact that when people ask kind of what's it like playing the tour, it must be so amazing. And she uploads a picture of herself eating Doritos, saying, gets bageled on your birthday, sitting eating Doritos at midnight, waiting to get on a 16-hour flight home. And the picture is a selfie, and it is real. It's the realest of the real. So what a legend. And I think it's one where you can definitely call her very relatable. I mean, she had a beer at the US Open and now she's having Doritos at midnight before her flight. So happy birthday, Jessie Pegula.
I mean, so relatable, in fact, that I actually had a sad bag of Doritos earlier. So I feel like me and Pegula, we're on the same wavelength here.
Is it your birthday?
I just want crisps now.
Yeah. Well, I don't want pancakes, that's for sure.
I know what to get Joel for his birthday now. A bag of Doritos. There's nice and easy present there. But yeah, all this crisp chat, which is exceptional, it's making me want to have some crisps. Although I'm not a fan of Doritos, I am a salt and vinegar girl. So Jessie is relatable, but only to a certain extent, because I can't relate to Dorito eaters in quite that way. But I do love the fact that she was just like so honest about what she was getting up to. And, you know, professional athlete.
I think that's a great way to spend your birthday.
I mean, I would have had more than Doritos as well. I would have had chocolate, cake, but
she did have cakes.
I
can confirm. Coco Gauff did comment underneath her doubles partner and said,
yes.
I did sing to you and I did give you a cake. So, I mean, it wasn't all bad, but I think...
Doritos and cake
at that
for your
particular
birthday,
moment,
I mean, that is living the life.
That's just a kid's party.
Well, yeah. What I saw this week as well, talking about social media and tennis players, slightly more glamorous than sitting at an airport watching or eating Doritos, was I saw that Maria Sharapova and Serena Williams were reunited. They were both in London, actually, at the Moncler fashion show, which is a designer brand that I'm not particularly au fait with, but it was a nice photo that Sharapova put on her Instagram of the two of them looking very nice and glamorous. So I thought that was a nice touch because they're both mothers now as well, and both retired / evolved away from the tennis court. So I thought that was a nice moment as well.
That is nice, isn't it? And it's good to see that the 20-2 head-to-head hasn't got in the way of that friendship blossoming in retirement.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if they talk about that at all. Probably not. They probably just talk about passion.
I do have one conspiracy theory here, though, that Sharapova is actually on the board of Moncler. So maybe this was something where she's very pleased that Serena's there because of the PR that it gets her. So maybe there was a business objective here because she is a director of the company.
Spoken like a true PR and branding expert, Chris.
Or maybe they're just friends, maybe it was just tennis and now they're just mates.
Yeah. And just going back to JPEG, for ages, I used to call GIFs GIFs. So that's my little confession
Joel,
that I have to make.
Joel, have you ever got a format wrong? Were you a GIFer or a JIFer?
No, absolutely
PNG?
not. I know, I'm a master of all.
A ping? A PNG? A ping? No, he's a professional.
And moving on to the action on the tennis court and not random file formats, let's start in Dubai because we had the WTA 1000 event out in Dubai. We all thought Iga Swiatek was going to absolutely walk this one. She started in fine form, losing, just a handful of games as she progressed through the tournament, also getting a nice walkover en route. But when it came to the final against Barbora Krejcikova, shock horror, it was completely the other way round. We had Krejcikova winning 6-4, 6-2 in straight sets, beating Iga Swiatek, much to everyone's surprise, and not just beating Swiatek, beating the number 1, number 2, and number 3 seeds in the tournament, which hasn't been done very often. Chris, what did you make of Krejcikova out in Dubai? What did you make of this kind of somewhat shock win?
Well, I've always been kind of a big fan of Krejcikova. I've always really kind of highly rated her. When you watch her play, she looks so balanced on both sides and she moves so much better than I think people give her credit for. So that was one of my key takeouts of watching her this week. I think she also has this sort of uncanny ability to really wipe the memory bank of what's happened the point before and then play the next point as though the unforced error she hit that went way beyond the baseline never happened, which I think is a really underrated skill in terms of having that mental fortitude. And she talked about with that kind of French Open run, how she'd worked with kind of a sports psychiatrist that had really helped her with this. And she is rock solid mentally. She got bageled by Sabalenka and then went on to win that. So I think she really does... She does put up great resistance, and that was what she did in this one. She really knuckled down. She played good percentage tennis. I think her margin was great. And I think Iga was a bit under the weather, she did say. And I think she wasn't necessarily feeling at her most healthy. But Krejcikova, when you see this matchup, I don't think many of the people in the know would be that surprised because of what happened in Ostrava. That match was pretty epic, and that was a sort of a fully fit Iga. So I was very impressed. I do think that the scoreline was probably a bit more one-sided than we would have thought. But if you think about her being under the weather, I think we could forgive Iga of that one. And she can't win every match 6-1, 6-love, can she?
No, that was getting a bit ridiculous, the way she'd kind of started out this tournament in the same fashion as last week, where she only lost 5 games on the way to the title. Krejcikova, a bit of a bogey woman, perhaps. Good game plan and a combination of the fact that Swiatek as well wasn't at her best or feeling her best.
And I do wonder if Krejcikova has shown Swiatek, actually, we talk about Swiatek and her high tennis IQ and being able to adapt, on the court, always sort of thinking and being able to kind of change up your strategy if it's not working. But I think with this match, for me, again, Krejcikova has showed that she has a very high tennis IQ as well. Dare I say even higher than Swiatek's. She's a great, we know that she's such a great doubles player. And I feel like she's, sort of got all these different experiences. She's a singles Grand Slam champion as well. She is another player who I think can just think on the fly and tweak things if it's not going her way. Case in point, that match against Sabalenka in the quarterfinals when, she got bageled and came back to win. So yeah, I think that's helped her. It was interesting as well to read, in January, she was like, I'm going to go focus on the singles, and her and Siniakova both come to that decision after what feels like dominating the doubles scene forever. So it certainly looks to be paying dividends, and I'm really excited by this result because, of course, we've got the hard courts coming up in Indian Wells and Miami, but we know Krejcikova's form on clay, seen her being a French Open Grand Slam champion, and you'd say that's Swiatek's strongest surface, and you'd say if there was one surface she was the most unstoppable on, it'd probably be the Parisian clay. But this is, again, I think, put a little bit of a reminder to Swiatek that she's not going to have it all her own way.
Yeah, should they meet at Roland Garros, it could get interesting given the last 2 times they've played. Krejcikova is now back up to 16 in the world rankings, and given that she missed Indian Wells and Miami last season, she doesn't really have many points to defend because she was out injured for a while. So I'd expect her ranking to go back up there where she was before if she continues her good form. She's on her own sort of, little win streak, really. And also only the 5th female player to have beaten the top 3 seeds in a tournament in the last 40 years on the WTA Tour. So it doesn't happen very often that you actually kind of take out the top 3 seeds. So, and also interesting scorelines. Like you said, she was bageled by Sabalenka, came back to win, and absolutely thrashed Jessie Pegula in 2 of the 3 sets that they played. So that was sort of some interesting matchups. But yeah, I'm already thinking Roland Garros could be interesting in that respect. One match that caught your eye, Joel, I know you love a bit of sort of scoreboard intrigue. It was the Madison Keys Coco Gauff match. Tell us why it was, in your words, possibly the worst match on the tour this year.
I mean, we've just spoken about our highlights. This for me was a low light because I was really looking forward to this match. Gauff, Keys, we both know they've got tremendous ability and talent, and when they can play, they could put on a fantastic spectacle. Did that happen in this match? Absolutely not. 14 winners to 82 unforced errors combined in the match.
Goodness.
Let me just give you a distribution of Coco Gauff's 64 points that she won. 1 was an ace, 3 were winners, 51 were Madison Keys unforced errors, and then we had 9 Keys forced errors. Yeah, it was a very messy it was a very, very messy match. And I mean, Chris, is there a player no more frustrating, I feel, than Madison Keys in terms of has ability, but you're just like where is it? The erraticness she can show is, to me, at times just baffling.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think when we've seen her, when she first came on the tour, and even before that, when she took Serena out in a 1-set shootout in World Team Tennis back in the day. Immense talent, immense shot making. Her movement's been improving, but it's one of those ones where if she's off, she's really off. And I think there are some matchups that bring out the worst in her, and players that are very mobile or can kind of hit very, very big seems to really cause her a problem. Their last match was pretty ropey as well at the US Open, and Coco came through that, and that was also pretty bad numbers. I think I remember that wasn't the most enjoyable watch. But I'd say, I mean, if we're talking about players who are up and down, I mean, we're going to get to Sloane Stephens later, so maybe I should keep a bit quiet here.
Oh, I thought we'd agreed not to mention Sloane Stephens this episode, Chris. But yeah, we will reveal why later for those of you who don't know what happened in the week. Let's stay in the Middle East now and look at the other tournament that was taking place out there. We had the Doha ATP 250 in Qatar. And interesting final because we had Daniil Medvedev in his second final in a row, going for a second title in a row, up against Andy Murray, another former world #1. Andy Murray coming through, in classic dramatic Murray fashion throughout the week.
So many match points saved.
Yes, saving 8 match points, a couple of last set tie breaks. Is Andy Murray the most entertaining player on the ATP Tour these days? I mean, he definitely was at the Australian Open for me, and I just genuinely think he provides the most value for money almost.
I think he's the story of the season so far, arguably. I mean, he had a wild card into Doha. Again, I wasn't really expecting a lot. Yes, we've seen him play some fantastic matches, at the Australian Open, and he was, in that first week, he really was the story of particularly on the men's side, the story of the tournament. But again, it's been impressive to see him bring that to Doha and just show just what a battler and how mentally strong he is. Whenever he's down all these match points, he can just bring out his best tennis and really, really challenge his opponent that it is not done until it is done. And it was amazing for him to get through all the way to the final. And although he came up a little bit short against Medvedev, to me it was a little bit understandable because I watched the final, and there were times when I was just thinking, does Murray look a little bit leggy given how many hours he's put onto the court in this tournament, but also this season as well? Yeah,
so I mean, just to get to the final, it was up against, so it was Murray Medvedev, and it did end Medvedev straight sets 6-4, 6-4 over Murray, which, I mean, Chris, did you think that was kind of an acceptable scoreline, I suppose? Is Murray, kind of obviously had a long battle to get to the final, probably quite knackered, up against Medvedev, who is much younger and was on his own kind of little streak. What did you make of Murray in the actual final? Was this kind of a reasonable result given the conditions and where he's at really in his career nowadays?
Yeah, I think it's a really tricky matchup for him in terms of Medvedev's also someone who makes you beat him, especially at the moment. And so I think in this one, it was always going to be an uphill battle to get that ball through the court. Murray's not necessarily known as being one of the biggest hitters, but this week I do think he did hit the ball a lot harder than I've seen him, especially on some of the big points. He was pretty fearless. So it was one where I could maybe see this going 3, but I think kind of the key thing for me was that if Medvedev was on, this would be a very difficult challenge, even if he hadn't had that much time on court previously. But so many positives, though, I think, generally. I mean, although that was a 6-4, 6-4 loss, the only time he did get to only play 2 sets, and unfortunately he was on the wrong side of that one. But you got to feel for Judy Murray. I mean, I think she did a tweet saying, can't you just get it done in 2? Because the amount of time she must have spent watching her son on court this year is something else, isn't it?
He's putting everyone, I feel, in British tennis, connected to British tennis, through the ringer at the moment. But yeah, great result. I think he has already pulled out of Dubai, given just he doesn't want to kind of force it. And, he's obviously aware of his limitations. But yeah, great week for Murray.
Yeah, but also up quite a bit in the rankings to 52 in the world. So yeah, I mean that's great stuff. And Medvedev also continuing his good form, is the first player to get back-to-back titles this season on the ATP Tour. We did also have another, we had quite a few ATP tournaments last week. Let's go out to the Golden Swing.
And another Brit in the final.
Another Brit in the final. Different result this time though, because we had a Brit win. So Cameron Norrie, playing out in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, was up against Carlos Alcaraz, top seed, world #2, in the final.
Again,
we did say that it looked like it was going to be another Alcaraz Norrie
part 2.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Golden Swing next installment, Alcaraz and Norrie show.
Does that mean the Rio Open was just like a bigger draw, but just slightly more filler. Is that what we're taking from that?
Yeah, basically. A couple more Cerandulos in there, maybe.
I mean, there's more than two.
The long-lost third brother of the Cerandolos.
Yes.
They're actually triplets, yeah. Oh, no, but they're not twins, are they? They're just brothers. Oh, I don't know. Anyway, let's not get into the Cerandolo family tree. But yeah, Cameron Norrie, he's a winner on the ATP Tour again. 5-7, 6-4, 7-5. He came back to win in 3 sets against Carlos Alcaraz. Yeah, Joel, what did you make of the final? What did you make of Norrie actually being able to kind of topple Alcaraz? Because when I saw they were in the final together again, I just kind of assumed it was going to go the same way. But, what was the kind of deciding factor in him turning that match around, do you think?
Yeah, I think a lot of people were sort of expecting, same matchup, same result. I do wonder that, Carlos Alcaraz, he did look like he was suffering from a possible leg injury. I know he's, just come back on the tour after having issues with his thigh and hamstring. And I did think that inhibited his movement, particularly in that third set. I mean, it was quite obvious he had to change up his strategy and just sort of go for broke and keep the rallies at a minimum. And although that worked to some point, Norrie was able to deal with it. So I do think that was quite a big factor, particularly as the match went on. But certainly I think Norrie has shown that he's just very consistent from the back of the court and also from the front of the court. Alcaraz was bringing out a lot of the drop shots, but I felt Norrie was doing pretty well to chase a lot of them down. And he just kind of kept composure. And you consider with Norrie, I think he was a set down and I think he was a set and a breakdown. And he just sort of kept going, kept plugging away. And it was really, I think, pivotal for him, obviously, to win that second set and turn it around from a breakdown. And given, the results from last week, putting that out of his mind as well, really, really strong performance.
And there was a bit of hoo-ha, wasn't there? I think what we've heard since the result with Norrie not being happy at Alcaraz taking injury timeouts. What's the story there, Chris? Did Norrie have a point, or was he just getting a bit flustered in the circumstances?
I think, in the heat of the moment in the final, what happened was that Carlos was quite visibly injured and he pretty much shifted his game plan to try and shorten the points because he seemed to have sort of a leg injury. And so that obviously kind of threw off Norrie's rhythm, or he felt that did. He wasn't necessarily aware that his opponent, he said, was injured. He thought his opponent was just actually playing a bit better because there was one game where Carlos was obviously not able to move as well, but he was just hitting winners for fun because he went for the go for broke mentality to kind of stop himself from making that injury any worse. So there was a bit of rumblings about the fact that to say that you didn't know he was injured and kind of having a bit of an issue with the timeout wasn't good from a sportsmanship perspective. And I think there probably is a bit of a point, that if someone does take an injury timeout, it's within the rules. And it's obvious that he was injured. So I think it was the fact that he said he didn't know he was injured, which makes you kind of a bit concerned because I think everyone watching was well aware of it. So maybe Norrie was too in the final to notice.
I do wonder with Alcaraz, seeing this happen, whether has he been brought back to the tour so early? And maybe, we look at Murray and he was saying around how, look, I know my limitations. I don't want to reach them because I don't want to get injured again. And I wonder with whether Alcaraz, given, what we've seen, we'll wait to see if he does play in Acapulco, where I think he's the top seed, but it feels very, very unlikely. So, yeah, I think there's a bit of kind of addressing of the schedule and not maybe coming back to the tour as quick as possible, because I do think this week Alcaraz was a lot messier in his performances than last week. And although I feel, he's very exciting, he's box office news, I get that, and I get that the ATP Tour and their social channels want to show all the great winners that he hits from outside the court, forehands down the line, etc. But watching it on the TV, he was hitting also a lot of shots, regular shots, like quite long. It wasn't all just absolutely spectacular tennis. There was a lot of ugly tennis as well from Alcaraz. And again, I think that just sort of played into Norrie's hand. And I'm just loving Norrie in the golden swing. It just feels like he's the only good European out there. And he's just really relished it, I feel.
It's a bit like the Casper and Nadal tour that they did, isn't it? It's almost like those two are just waiting to play. Where are they playing next week?
Yeah.
on their tour of South America. But I was going to say on the point about Carlos, I think he does always make some errors. You know, he doesn't necessarily hit the most winners, but the winners he does make are right at the end of a long rally. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's kind of how he won the US Open. It was not always pretty tennis, and he played more hours on a court than anyone's ever played before. So he does have that sort of wear you down mentality, as well as kind of giving you some free points that it'd be better if he didn't. I was going to say, you know, we did make jokes about the golden swing. Looking at how big a deal this is for Norrie, I was going to ask you both. It's a 500. A 500 title is no small feat, but he didn't really have to play anyone until the final, and then arguably his opponent was sort of injured. So where do we stand on that versus, you know, the 1,000 for the women this week in Dubai, where, I mean, it was the 1, 2, 3, 8, 15, or was it 15 in the world? Yes. So it was really quite something versus just the number 2 and then no one else in the top 60. It seems a bit skewed.
Krejcikova didn't have to play anyone, I think, ranked above 40. So all her opponents were, you know, in the top 40 to win in Dubai. And that was a 1,000 event. So obviously in Rio it's 500. But yeah, Norrie was playing, I don't know, 63 in the world, 111 in the world, 83, 107 in the world. So very different caliber.
If I'm Norrie, I would absolutely take that, to be honest. You've still got to prove yourself. And, you know, for him, I think he's looking at, you know, playing these events to get better on a surface he maybe doesn't feel as comfortable on versus other surfaces. So if you're going to be presented with this opportunity, go make the most of it. And that's, you know, what I feel he has done. I think the drawback of playing something like the Golden Swing is that we've still got big hard court events to come. And, you know, he's got Acapulco now, and then we're going on to, you know, Indian Wells and Miami. And rather than, you know, be in the, you know, the Middle East and Europe, or have played Delray, he's going to have to transition from the hard to the clay and now back to the hard. And I think that's the drawback. And maybe that's the reason why we're seeing, you know, these draws 4 or 500 not have as many quality players as we would have liked, because they just feel like that's a needless transition that I don't necessarily have to make.
He was there to get the ranking points, wasn't he? I think he was already in the area. It made sense. Probably
saw the entry list and he was like, yep, I'm having some of that.
Yeah,
as a second
exactly.
seed.
And it's mission accomplished in many ways. So I agree. I think he might be booking a ticket to Rio next year.
Yeah, well, it's also good travel, isn't it? Who doesn't want to see a bit of Rio and Buenos Aires if you haven't been there before, perhaps?
I always feel that we always hear news stories about tournaments. I think I was reading actually about Doha, you know, last week. They're looking for it to be upgraded from a 250 into a 500. And I remember, you know, last week we talked about that was a very strong field for a 250. But you never really hear of tournaments actually being downgraded from like a 500 to a 250. Now, I'm not saying that Rio should be downgraded, but yeah, you don't generally ever hear those discussions, and it always feels it only goes one way without ever considering the other way.
Demotion for tournaments. Well, I mean, let's talk about the 250s that we did have, because we had a 250 out in Marseille, which was won by the top seed Hubert Hurkacz. He beat Benjamin Bonzi in the final. Bonzi's second final, I think, of the year. He made his maiden tour final in Pune last month. But came up against Hubert Hurkacz, who won in straight sets 6-3, 7-6. Defeating Bonzi, who was a local French lad. But Hurkacz, back to winning ways, back to title winning ways. I don't think he's won one since last June when he won Halle. So nice for him to be back on the winners' circle. Joel, what did you make of Hurkacz's week in Marseille? What did you make of Benjamin Bonzi getting to the final?
I think for Hurkacz, it was pretty scratchy to begin with. I think he was still trying to find some form, but he certainly, I think, grew into the tournament. I think he had a very solid win against Alexander Bublik in the semi-finals, and I think his serving, it got better, and generally speaking, when his serve gets better and is more on song, then he's a lot more of a formidable opponent. And in the final, I think again we saw what we know, I think, about where Hurkacz, when he plays his best tennis, it's usually his serve is doing really well. He's able to come into the net and his volleying just kind of finishes off the point. And I do think there is a case to be made that Hurkacz is probably one of the best volleyers on the tour at the moment. And Bonzi didn't really have an answer to it. And I was reading about Bonzi, and he's obviously having a very good season at the moment, but I feel like he's still got nerves and pressure to deal with, because he had that final in Pune last month, and lost to Griekspoor, and I think he had found it quite challenging, I think, trying to serve it out against Fee in the semi-final. So I wonder also if there's any sort of nervousness that he had playing at home that played into Hurkacz's hands as well.
Yeah, because Arthur Fee, a French wildcard, got to get into the semis, so they're quite nice for the locals. Fee did benefit from a Yannick Sinner withdrawal.
He is going to be interesting, I think, to watch at Roland Garros. I think he's on the cusp of the top 100. He's on the cusp of the top 100. It's inevitably going to happen. And who knows, is he going to add himself into the never-ending list of who's the next French male number one?
It's still Gasquet, I have to say right now, but I would love to see a showdown on Chatrier. I'm sure we'll get many Frenchman versus Frenchman clashes in prime time slots, because that is how the French Open goes. But no, I think it was great to see, that after our probably slightly too harsh criticism of the French men's singles sort of rankings at the moment, I think it was good to see that we have got some of these players who are pushing on a bit further than they have done, as well as some of the older generation who's also doing well. So I think it's soon we'll have to drop it, won't we? We'll have to be celebrating when Fee becomes, top 10.
So let's look at one last tournament before we take a quick break, and that was the Merida Open in Mexico, which is a WTA 250. This was won by Camila Giorgi. She beat Rebecca Peterson in 3 sets in the final. Giorgi was unseeded, but we all know what she is capable of on her day. She has won a WTA 1000 event back in the day. Yeah, let's talk about that one, because although Rebecca Peterson getting to the final was great, the one match that really caught all of our eyes this week was Giorgi and Sloane Stephens in the quarterfinal. It was a double bagel, which you don't see very often on the tour. Chris, you're a big Sloane Stephens fan. Did you tune in to see this, or did you get to sort of 5-love and turn off?
I have taken the approach that it didn't happen. She's at a new tournament. She's in Texas. She's doing interviews about how important the tournament is out there. She's not worried about it. I'm not worried about it. But when I saw that score, the mind boggles, because that's not a Sloane Stephens scoreline.
That's not a Camila Giorgi scoreline. I swear, Giorgi will always give you a chance, or she's never got the consistency, I feel, to do it in 2 sets in that sort of complete fashion. I mean, generally speaking, for me, that was the story of the tournament, was just me being surprised with how well Giorgi played and how consistent she was able to play. And even in that final, when she dropped that second set 6-1, she came storming back. So, yeah, it was just all general surprise for me.
But when she is on, we do know that Camila Giorgi is very dangerous. I saw some of the stats from this, that in terms of points won on second serve, she won 100% of points won in her second serve, and Sloane won 0. So clearly she was serving well and she was returning pretty exceptionally. She still did only win 6 of 12 break points. So there's something for her to improve on in that victory. But I'm praying for Sloane next week. Well, this week now, I'm really hoping that she can put that behind her, because I mean, man, that's got to hurt. Her first ever double bagel loss.
I wonder if it's just, maybe she just wanted to experience one at some point in her career as well. It's like a tick box for every tennis player.
Character building.
Dish one out, receive one. Who knows?
Maybe she was really disappointed she wasn't in Dubai against Swiatek and was like, I want the feeling of a bagel.
I want to feel like I'm being routed by someone.
Yeah.
Giorgi, possible dark horse going into the golden swing, the sunshine double. Perhaps, we've seen she's more than capable on her hard court, having won Montreal in 2021. So we will see. But yeah, great stuff from Giorgi in Mexico. Let's take a quick break now, but we will be back in the second half discussing Novak Djokovic and his new record for most weeks ever as the world number one. And also rumours of Roger Federer commentating for the BBC during Wimbledon this year. And we'll be looking at this week's events as well in Acapulco and Dubai. So do not go anywhere. Welcome back to the Tennis Weekly podcast, sponsored by downloadtennis.com. Now we're going to move on to a little spot of par for the courts
yes.
to kick off our second half. Joel, I believe off the back of your victory last week, you are now taking the turn of challenging myself and Chris.
I'm still glowing from that victory, Kim. It's a great feeling.
Absolutely. Well, I hope you've been enjoying that glow along with your pepperami from the fridge. But what have you got up your sleeve for me and Chris?
Yes.
I need to win one. I haven't won one in a long time.
I genuinely think this is winnable because I've got a list here that I think you both could do well on. Because I think it relates to our formative years as tennis fans.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Intriguing.
This is a par for the courts back and forth, and I am looking at the WTA end of season rankings in 2012, the top 20 players. So the top 20 women in the WTA end of season 2012 rankings.
Okay, who's going to go first then?
Kim, you can go first.
Okay, right. Answer number 1, Serena Williams.
Correct, yes. Finished number 3 in the rankings.
Sharapova.
Correct. Finished number 2 in the rankings.
Caroline Wozniacki.
Correct. Finished number 10 in the rankings.
Azarenka?
Correct. Finished number 1 in the rankings.
Petra Kvitova.
Correct. Number 8 in the rankings.
I'm going to go with Angie Kerber.
Correct. Number 5 in the rankings.
Oh, this is quite tricky. Lucy Safarova?
Correct. Yes. Number 17 in the rankings. Chris, over to you.
Lena.
Correct. Yes. Number 7 in the rankings.
Dominika Cibulkova.
Correct. Yes. Number 15 in the rankings.
You're showing off now, Kim. I'm gonna... Oh, this is getting tricky. Have you said Ivanovic?
Anna Ivanovic is a correct answer. Yes. Number 13 in the rankings.
Marion Bartley.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, Kim, that is an incredible guess. And it's a correct answer. Number 11 in the rankings.
Have we said Sam Stosur? I'm going to say Sam Stosur.
We haven't said Sam Stosur. And Sam Stosur is a correct answer, yes. Number 9 in the rankings.
Goodness.
Oh, this is getting tough.
There's 2 players still in the top 10 that have not been named.
I've got a couple on my mind. I don't know if she was around up that high so early on, so I don't want to say her. Garbina Muguruza.
Garbina Muguruza? It's incorrect, Kim. Chris wins it.
Oh, no.
Chris wins it. Garbina Muguruza not on the list. Nowhere near the list.
Oh. Can I tell you the other players I was thinking about?
Yes. Redeem yourself.
I was thinking Simona Halep, but I think that might be a bit early for her.
No, Simona Halep would also have been an incorrect answer. Chris.
What about Lisicki?
I had Sara Irani on my list.
Sara Irani?
I think she
Sara
made
Irani
a
was
semi-final and a final that year.
Yep, Sara Irani, number 6 in the rankings. And one more player in the top 10. No one got any ideas. We've spoken about her recently, actually.
Petrova?
It's not, but Petrova is on the list at number 12. I was talking about who's number 4 in the rankings, Agnieszka Radwanska.
Oh, that is bad. Yes. We should have got that. She's been everywhere this week.
That year.
So you could have had
I was trying to think who got to like the slam finals.
I'll go from 1 to 20. You could have had Azarenka, Sharapova, Serena Williams, Radwanska, Kerber, Irani, Lee Na, Petra Kvitova, Sam Stosur, Caroline Wozniacki, Marion Bartoli, Nadia Petrova, Anna Ivanovic, Maria Kirilenko, Dominika Sibolkova, Roberta Vinci, Lucy Savajova, Julia Gerges, Kaya Kanepi, and the final one, Makarova of Russia.
Now, which Makarova was that? Is that the one who's playing now?
The older Katerina.
Yes. That would make sense.
Not the one with the same name, who they put like the year of birth in brackets on the live score.
Can I ask where the inspiration came for this one, Joel? This seems rather unusual.
I don't know. I just felt, 2012, it was, the time that tennis was in London for the Olympics. And for me, that was a very fun year on the tour. There were lots of big names on the WTA tour, and I just wanted to relive past glories.
Excellent. I quite like those trip down memory lanes. Yeah. Excellent. I love it. And although I lost, I think we both did pretty well. So well done us. Let's have a look at what's in the mailbag this week, because we have got a lovely email from David who has asked us, hi guys, it seems like a lot more players are withdrawing from matches and tournaments and getting injured. What do you think is behind this? So quite an interesting and thought-provoking question from David. Thank you for getting in touch. Joel, let's start with you. What do you think might be the reason for the seeming increase in withdrawals? Because there does seem to be quite a lot these days, isn't there?
Yeah, first of all, I think just the game in general has got a lot more physical, particularly on the men's tour, and I think that physicality that has been ushered in, by players like Rafa Nadal, I think has led to more withdrawals and injuries. I also think that there's just loads of tennis on the calendar, and I feel like some players might feel pressured into playing events, whether that's for sponsorship or for prize money or ranking points, and again, they might not necessarily be fully fit. The season is January to November. It is very, very long, and putting so much wear and tear and pressure on your body, considering the court surfaces as well, it's not very forgiving. And I think if you don't pick your schedule and know your limitations, that we've seen the big players, I think, especially do over the years, thinking about Andy Murray and how he picks and chooses events, I think it can get very demanding on you very, very quickly. And again, I think that's another reason why we're seeing, I think, more injuries in generally.
Yeah, and also I was thinking maybe players are just better aware of when they should reach their limits and call it a bit of a day, whereas before they might have just wanted to have ploughed on, but there's a bit more of a self-care attitude, like when they do get to that point and they're not feeling great, it's like, actually I need to look after my body, and maybe it's a healthier attitude when you do find that there's issues. Maybe it's a post-COVID thing, more germs going around that we're not already immune to because we're not traveling for a while. I don't know, there's the whole load of things. A lot of sponsorship activity off court, as well. Like you mentioned, there's a lot more demands. Chris, what do you think? What's your two penneth on this? Why do you think that there might be more withdrawals than normal, more injuries perhaps happening?
Yeah, I think a lot of players didn't really take an off season kind of in the traditional way. We've seen a lot more activity there, as you say, kind of the sponsorship. There's a lot more money on the line, a lot more kind of pressures to be on the court as much as possible. Something that struck me about this and about this question particularly is some of the quotes from players about the tennis balls they've been playing with, having lots of difficulties with them, especially when it's come to their wrists. And Medvedev was very vocal on this week, and I think he didn't really want to be one of those players that moans about the balls, but I think he really does think the Dunlop ball is causing quite serious problems. He said he had a lot of pain after the quarter match. And then in Rotterdam, he thought maybe it was just kind of him and Felix, FAA, who had the issues with the balls, who were very vocal on it. And a lot of the doubles players were having problems. So I think it's a case where there's a few factors, whether that's kind of playing a lot, going from different surfaces. But it does seem like a lot of players, I think he said that Holger Rune, Tsitsipas, Korda, it was all kind of wrist, shoulder and elbow, which he thinks could be related to this Dunlop ball. So it's a real multitude of reasons, but it does seem like we're seeing a lot more walkovers, a lot more withdrawals, and a lot more retiring. So I think it's a bit of everything.
Medvedev could have a very good point then.
Yeah.
If the balls have changed, as a result,
the detective of the Dunlop balls. He's really getting under the fluff to find out what's going on there.
Let's hope they don't want him to be their top, sponsorship opportunity.
Just check if you've got a deal with them before you say it.
Yeah, I was going to say, he wants the Slazenger balls to come back. Is he a undercover Slazenger sponsor?
I think he is.
I mean, are we seeing more on the men's game, like more withdrawals? I mean, if you look at, like, for example, Iga Swiatek versus someone like Andy Murray, their time on court within the space of 1 week prior to, say, like the Dubai and the Doha finals. I think Andy Murray played just shy of 20 hours and Iga Swiatek played just over 5 hours. Massive difference.
That's huge.
And obviously, as a result, one person's body is going to be a hell of a lot more impacted than the other. So are people just not getting the job done? Are we just playing longer and longer? Or is it just because people are better matched? Improvements going on all the time in all sorts of aspects, and more matches, perhaps people are just more evenly matched. And then as a result, matches are just going to go on and on and on. So it's it's a really tricky one. Thank you, David. Lots to think about, lots of food for thought. I don't think we fully answered the question because there's so many factors, but it's a good one to get our teeth into. Do keep your questions coming each week into the mailbag. Before we head off today, just a couple of bits of news. Obviously, Novak Djokovic, yet another milestone in his career. He continues to make history. He now has the record for the most weeks ever by either a man or a woman as world number 1. So Steffi Graf already held that. But the Novak Djokovic has today surpassed her number of weeks, which is just ridiculous. This is his 378th week at number 1, not consecutively, of course, but yeah, that's a hell of a lot. Trying to work out how many years that equates to, but my maths isn't good enough. Joel, what do you think about Novak Djokovic's most recent accomplishment? Do you think this is a big significance in terms of the overall context of the GOAT debate?
Yeah, it's an amazing statistic. It's an amazing record. It's nothing new, I think, to Djokovic. He's been lapping up records, I think, over all over his career, and it's one, I think, that shows his consistency and his ever presence at the top of the game. So from that perspective, it's a fantastic achievement. And I do think that when all is said and done, when we look at Djokovic and compare him to Nadal and Federer, yes, I think we're naturally going to be talking about trophies and Grand Slams. And I think we're going to be overweighting and comparing them on those levels. And I think maybe for the tennis purists, they're going to care a little bit more about weeks at the number 1 in terms of the ranking. Personally, for me, I'm still a bit more like I will measure the success on the trophies he wins as opposed to weeks at the top of the ranking. But it's still, I think, nothing to be sniffed at, and it just shows how impressive it is, particularly I think given the era that he has been. I always think it's so hard to compare like for like time at the top of rankings because so many eras are very different to each other in terms of the players and the depth. But certainly the era he is in, I feel like that has potentially elevated this achievement. But I'm still like Grand Slams still for me is the de facto thing to judge Federer, Nadal, Djokovic on.
And talking of Roger Federer, actually, from one GOAT contender to another, Roger Federer was spotted at Wimbledon last week, which is very exciting. And there's been a bit of speculation about the possibility of him potentially getting involved in Wimbledon this year, perhaps as a commentator or a pundit. Chris, what do you make of this speculation? Do you think he would be a good addition to the BBC Wimbledon coverage this year?
I mean, I think he's certainly got the credentials for it. I think there are a few people with a...
Do you think? I'm not so sure, actually.
A couple less slams out there that have been doing commentary. So he definitely would know his stuff. I think it would be great to get his take. I wouldn't necessarily want him for every match. I'd like him to be used a bit like, a John McEnroe in the sense that we get him for the semi-finals and maybe the final. So I just think, he is such a legend of the game. He almost feels, obviously, he's tennis royalty. And I just don't want to see him out there, commentating on the qualies or anything like that. I want him to stick to the marquee matches. But he is a big fan of tennis. So he'll be watching anyway, I imagine. So maybe this is just a way for him to stay closer to the action.
It could add a new level or layer to the GOAT or the big three debate, I feel. Imagine, you just know the broadcasters are like, get me Roger Federer commentating on a Novak Djokovic match. And I would be fascinated to see how that turns out. I think it's really nice when you have recently retired players because they add... much more like...
What it was like to play them,
Yeah, they've got so much more direct experience of those players and facing them, than someone who retired 50 years ago. I mean, I prefer to listen to the more recently retired players. I personally think they're more engaging for, the current audience, perhaps. So I think it'd be great. I'm all for Roger Federer getting involved. And I think he'll just miss it otherwise. I think he wants to get involved in some way. Maybe he could replace Sue Barker. Maybe he could just host the whole fortnight.
Mr. Can't be mad at that replacement.
Let's have a look though. That's a long way off, but let's look at what's happening this week on tour. We've got 500 events out in Acapulco and Dubai for the men. Also, we've got an event in Chile on the clay of the Golden Swing. We've also got hard court tournaments in Austin, Texas, where Sloane Stephens is hoping not to get double bageled again.
Crossed.
And we've got the Monterey Open for the WTA as well. What are you most looking forward to? Obviously, Joel, you were looking forward to Malik Jaziri playing in his final tournament, but he's sadly lost already. So is there something else you're looking forward to now that he's finished? Yeah, I mean, of course, we've just spoken about Novak Djokovic. It'll be great to see him back on the tour in Dubai. Really tough field, I think. He's got Medvedev in his half. Greek Spore as well, who's been playing great. Hurkacz. So I think that's going to be quite a tough test for him to get to the final. So I'm interested to see how he gets on. And also Acapulco. I love this. And I didn't even realise this. Matteo Berrettini's brother. Yes, Matteo Berrettini has a brother who I had no idea about. I'm probably saying this wrong. Jacopo Berrettini came through as a qualifier.
Sounds like you've made this up, Joel. It really does.
I know, it sounds too good to be true. But came through qualifying, ranked, I think, in around the 850s or 860s. And yeah, he's playing Oscar Otter, I think, in the first round in Acapulco. So, yeah, like Berrettini brothers on tour.
So he must have got a wild card for qualifying, surely, then.
Yeah, it's...
Maybe someone
I think he did,
out.
actually.
Well,
it was some...
goodness.
Are they going to play the Tsitsipas brothers at some point? Yeah.
That'd be interesting. I'm going to have a look at the Ben Shelton, Holger Rune match. That they're doubles partners, I believe, in Indian Wells. So clearly they get along. So that'll be quite an intriguing affair. I think my money is on that going 3.
Yes, and who knows? Will Carlos Alcaraz take to the court as well? Because we don't know yet if he's playing or not. If his injury is going to be too much, so we'll see if that happens.
And Chris, you said to me, I know you said that was almost too good to be true about Berrettini, and he's got a brother. We've got to say Emma Raducanu's not playing Austin, Texas, because she's got tonsillitis of all things.
When I did see that headline, I thought someone had made something up on Twitter as a bit of a tennis Twitter joke, because I've never seen anyone pull up for tonsillitis. It's quite specific, normally it's a viral illness or something. So
I look forward to seeing that at the bottom of like the draw sheet.
It might say it. I'll have a check.
Emma Raducanu, tonsillitis.
Left ankle tonsillitis, yeah.
A bit of both.
Well, we wish her a speedy recovery. And obviously me and her have the same Instagram strategy, Latergrams. But yeah, let's see how she gets on. Let's hope she's back to business soon. And we'll be back next week for more of the same from Tennis Weekly.
Listeners, I hope you've enjoyed our latest episode of the Tennis Weekly podcast. Remember to subscribe to us to stay up to date on all the action to come from the ATP and WTA tours.
We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all major podcasting platforms out there. And if you like what you're hearing, then make sure to leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
You can also follow us on social media or email the show. We're on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter @TennisWeeklyPod, or email us on tennisweeklypod@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out our website, www.tennisweekly.co.uk.
And we will be back next Monday at Tennis Weekly HQ for another tour catch-up. So I hope you can join us for that. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from Kim.
Goodbye.
It's goodbye from Chris.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. We'll see you again soon.